March 18, 2018. The music echoed through the grand ballroom of the Royal Palace Hotel in Jaipur. Hundreds of guests filled the room. Business leaders, politicians, family members, friends. Everyone had gathered to witness what many called the wedding of the year. 28-year-old Aisha Mehra stood beneath a canopy of flowers beside her new husband, Arman Khan. The cameras captured every smile, every laugh, every celebration. To the people in that ballroom, this looked like the beginning of a perfect life. But years later, investigators would look back at those same photographs searching for something unusual. A warning. A clue. A sign. Anything. Because before sunrise, the bride would vanish without a trace. At 11:41 p.m., a photographer captured what would later become the most famous image in the case. Aisha smiling. Arman standing beside her. Their families surrounding them. Nothing looked strange. Nothing looked suspicious. The photograph appeared completely normal. Yet investigators would spend years studying that image. Zooming in. Examining expressions. Analyzing body language. Trying to answer a question that haunted the entire investigation. If Aisha planned to disappear, was there any sign of it hidden in plain sight? Or was she simply a woman whose life changed forever in the hours that followed? Shortly after midnight, security cameras recorded the newlyweds entering their hotel suite on the 10th floor. The footage showed nothing unusual. No argument. No tension. No visible signs of distress. Arman carried her handbag. Aisha laughed at something he whispered. The elevator doors closed behind them. For investigators, this footage would become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire case. Because it confirmed one thing. Aisha entered that room willingly. The mystery wasn't how she got there. The mystery was how she disappeared afterward. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Arman suddenly woke up. At first, he didn't know why. The room was dark. Silent. The only sound came from the air conditioning system humming softly in the background. Half asleep, he reached toward the other side of the bed. Nothing. The space beside him was empty. At first, he wasn't concerned. Perhaps she was in the bathroom. Perhaps she couldn't sleep. Perhaps she was making a phone call. But within minutes, a simple inconvenience would become a nightmare. Arman checked the bathroom. Empty. He checked the balcony. Empty. He checked the hallway. Empty. Then panic began creeping into his mind. Aisha wasn't answering her phone. She wasn't anywhere nearby. And the longer he searched, the more impossible the situation became. People don't simply disappear from a luxury hotel. Especially not in the middle of the night. Yet that was exactly what appeared to have happened. And the strangest discovery was still waiting inside the room. When investigators later examined the suite, they noticed something disturbing. Aisha's wedding jewelry remained on the dressing table. Her phone was charging beside the bed. Her shoes sat neatly near the door. Nothing appeared rushed. Nothing appeared violent. There were no signs of a struggle. No broken furniture. No blood. No evidence of an intruder. It looked as though she had simply stood up and walked away. But if that was true, where had she gone? And why had she left behind everything she would normally take with her? Within 20 minutes, hotel security launched a full-scale search. Employees checked stairwells, storage rooms, service corridors, rooftops, parking areas, every accessible part of the building. The search lasted for hours. Nothing. No witnesses. No sightings. No evidence. The bride had vanished. And as dawn approached, local police arrived at the hotel. The mystery was about to become much bigger than anyone imagined. By sunrise, investigators had gathered inside the hotel's surveillance control room. Dozens of cameras monitored every major hallway, entrance, elevator, and public area. If Aisha had left the building, the cameras should have captured it. Hour after hour, detectives watched the footage. Guests entered. Guests left. Hotel employees moved throughout the property. Everything appeared normal. But there was one problem. Aisha never appeared on any camera after entering the suite. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. For seasoned investigators, that wasn't just unusual. It was nearly impossible. And impossible cases often hide their secrets in the details everyone else overlooks. The hotel was immediately placed under intense scrutiny. Employees were questioned. Guest records were examined. Security logs were reviewed. Every person who had access to the building became a potential witness. Or a potential suspect. Detectives wanted answers. Had someone helped her leave? Had she been kidnapped? Or had she planned her disappearance herself? At that stage, nobody knew. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. This was no ordinary missing person case. Within 24 hours, the story dominated national headlines. News channels interrupted regular programming. Newspapers printed her photograph across their front pages. Social media exploded with theories. Some believed she had been abducted. Others suspected murder. Many questioned whether the marriage itself was hiding dark secrets. As public attention intensified, pressure mounted on investigators. The country wanted answers. And the police were running out of leads. Friends described Aisha as intelligent, kind, responsible. The type of person who always planned ahead. Her family insisted she would never voluntarily disappear. She loved her parents. She cared deeply about her younger sister. She had spent months planning her wedding. Nothing about her behavior suggested she was preparing to run away. At least, that's what everyone believed. Because hidden beneath the image of a perfect bride was a secret life nobody knew existed. 3 months into the investigation, detectives uncovered something unexpected. A hidden bank account. The account wasn't registered directly under Aisha's name. But evidence connected it to her personal phone number. The discovery raised immediate questions. Why would a woman planning a luxury wedding maintain a secret account? And why had she never told anyone about it? The answer would lead investigators down a path nobody expected. Financial analysts began tracing the transactions. The results were alarming. Over the course of a year, nearly 80 lakh rupees had moved through the account. The deposits came from different cities. Different names. Different sources. Some transfers appeared legitimate. Others looked suspicious. Nobody could explain why the money was moving. And more importantly, nobody could explain where it ultimately went. The money trail had become the investigation's most promising lead. Investigators turned their attention toward Arman. As Aisha's husband, he naturally became one of the first people questioned. Detectives asked about the secret account. The unusual transactions. The possibility that Aisha was hiding something. Arman appeared genuinely surprised. He denied knowing anything about the money. Anything about hidden accounts. Anything about secret financial dealings. If he was lying, investigators couldn't prove it. But if he was telling the truth, then Aisha had successfully hidden an entire part of her life from the man she planned to marry. Then another discovery changed everything. Travel records revealed that Aisha had visited Mumbai multiple times before her wedding. At first, her family wasn't concerned. She often traveled for work-related events. Fashion exhibitions. Business meetings. Social gatherings. But investigators noticed a pattern. Every trip ended at the same location. The same neighborhood. The same apartment building. The same address. And waiting at that address was a man nobody expected. The apartment belonged to a man named Vikram Rao. 32 years old. Divorced. Construction contractor. According to official records, there was nothing particularly unusual about him. But detectives quickly discovered something troubling. Phone records connected him directly to Aisha. When questioned, Vikram denied knowing her. Denied meeting her. Denied speaking with her. But the evidence told a very different story. And somebody wasn't telling the truth. Investigators examined the communication records. The results shocked everyone involved. Over 300 calls had been exchanged between Aisha and Vikram during the year leading up to the wedding. 300. That wasn't casual communication. That wasn't a coincidence. That suggested a relationship. A partnership. Or perhaps a conspiracy. The deeper investigators looked, the more complicated the mystery became. And the closer they came to discovering a truth nobody was prepared for. Despite months of work, the investigation began losing momentum. No body was found. No ransom demand arrived. No credible witness emerged. Every lead eventually ended in frustration. The case remained active. But progress slowed dramatically. As time passed, hope began fading. And eventually, the impossible happened. The mystery started growing cold. Years passed. The evidence board remained unchanged. Witnesses stopped calling. News coverage disappeared. The public moved on. For many people, Aisha Mehra became a tragic memory. Another unsolved case. Another unanswered mystery. Another life lost to uncertainty. But unknown to everyone searching for her. Aisha was still alive. And she was hiding in plain sight. October 2024. Nearly 6 years after the disappearance. A storm rolled across Mumbai as rain soaked the city streets. At an ordinary apartment complex, a security guard began his evening shift. He had no idea his life was about to intersect with one of the country's most famous unsolved mysteries. Because within the next few minutes, he would see a face he recognized instantly. A face he had seen years earlier on television screens across the nation. And that moment would change everything. At first, Rajesh didn't think much about the woman entering the apartment complex. She looked ordinary. A mother holding her daughter's hand while hurrying through the rain. People came and went every day. There was nothing unusual about that. But as she passed beneath a streetlight, something caught his attention. A familiar face. A familiar smile. A familiar pair of eyes. For a brief moment, Rajesh froze. His heart began beating faster. Because he was certain he had seen that face before. Not in person. On television. Years ago. During one of the biggest missing person investigations in the country. And suddenly, a mystery everyone believed was over came crashing back to life. Rajesh couldn't stop staring. The woman disappeared into the elevator with the little girl. For several minutes he remained standing near the entrance, trying to convince himself he was mistaken. 6 years was a long time. People changed. Faces aged. Memories faded. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Finally, he pulled out his phone. When the woman emerged later that evening, Rajesh discreetly took several photographs. He wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps instinct. Or perhaps some part of him already knew he had stumbled onto something extraordinary. Those photographs would soon reopen a case that had haunted investigators for years. The following morning, Rajesh made a phone call. It wasn't an easy decision. He worried about being wrong. He worried about wasting police resources. But he couldn't ignore what he had seen. When investigators received the photographs, they immediately compared them to images from the original missing persons file. The similarities were undeniable. Facial structure. Eye placement. Distinctive features. Everything pointed toward the same conclusion. The missing bride of Jaipur might still be alive. And if that was true, then the entire investigation had been built on a false assumption. Authorities moved quickly. A surveillance team was quietly assigned to monitor the apartment complex. Investigators reviewed records, property documents, utility bills, identification files. The woman living there wasn't named Aisha Mehra. At least officially. According to government records, her name was Priya Sharma. She had lived in Mumbai for years. She paid taxes, maintained bank accounts, held legal documents. Everything appeared legitimate. But as investigators dug deeper, they discovered something impossible. The identity itself was fake. A carefully constructed life built on fabricated records. And at the center of it all stood the woman who had vanished 6 years earlier. The discovery shocked everyone involved. Aisha wasn't hiding in isolation. She wasn't living in fear. She wasn't running from danger. Instead, she appeared to be living an ordinary life. She had a husband, a daughter, friends in the neighborhood, people who believed they knew her, people who trusted her, people who had absolutely no idea who she really was. For 6 years, she had successfully buried her past. And now that past was about to come knocking on her door. For several days, investigators watched from a distance. Every movement was documented. Every visitor recorded. Every routine analyzed. They needed certainty before making contact. What they observed only deepened the mystery. Aisha appeared calm, comfortable, normal. There were no signs of coercion. No signs of fear. No evidence that someone was forcing her to remain hidden. If she had disappeared willingly, then one question remained. Why? Why abandon everything? Why destroy an entire life and create another? The answer would soon emerge. But it wouldn't be what investigators expected. 3 days later, detectives arrived at apartment 307. The hallway felt strangely quiet. One officer knocked. A second officer stood beside him. Moments passed. Then the door opened. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The detectives looked at Aisha. Aisha looked at the detectives. 6 years of questions hung silently in the air. Finally, one investigator spoke. Mrs. Mehra, we need to talk. The color drained from her face. Because in that instant, she knew the secret was over. Inside the apartment, emotions quickly overwhelmed her. Aisha sat on the couch and began crying. Not softly. Not briefly. Years of fear, guilt, and pressure seemed to collapse all at once. The detectives remained patient. Nobody interrupted. Nobody rushed her. Because everyone understood the significance of that moment. For 6 years, the mystery had controlled countless lives. And now, the only person who truly knew the answer was finally ready to speak. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. 4 simple words. I never meant this. The room fell silent. Investigators exchanged glances. Those words raised more questions than answers. Because people don't disappear for 6 years by accident. People don't create fake identities by accident. People don't abandon their lives by accident. Whatever happened, it had been planned. Carefully. Patiently. Methodically. And the story behind that plan was about to shock everyone. Aisha took a deep breath. Then she began describing a life nobody knew existed. A life hidden behind smiles. Hidden behind wedding photographs. Hidden behind carefully crafted appearances. Years before the wedding, she had become trapped in a situation she believed she couldn't escape. Debt. Fear. Threats. Desperation. One mistake had become another. And another. Until eventually, she found herself standing at a crossroads. One path meant facing the consequences. The other meant disappearing forever. On her wedding night, she made a choice. A choice that would change the lives of everyone around her. And as investigators listened, they realized the truth was far darker than anyone had imagined. Years before the wedding, Aisha's life looked completely different. She wasn't preparing for marriage. She wasn't planning a future. She was fighting to survive. What started as a small financial mistake quickly spiraled out of control. One loan became two. Two became five. Interest accumulated faster than she could pay it back. At first, she managed to hide the problem from everyone around her. Her family knew nothing. Her friends knew nothing. Even the people closest to her believed everything was fine. But behind closed doors, the pressure was becoming unbearable. Every phone call brought new threats. Every message brought new demands. And every passing month pushed her closer to a decision that would eventually change everything. The messages arrived day and night. At first they were polite. Reminders. Warnings. Requests for payment. But over time, the tone changed. The language became aggressive. Threatening. Terrifying. According to Aisha, strangers began appearing near her apartment. Cars remained parked outside for hours. Unknown callers knew details about her daily routine. Whether the threats were real or imagined would remain a subject of debate. But one thing was certain. Aisha believed she was trapped. And people who feel trapped often make desperate decisions. Then she met Arman Khan. Successful. Wealthy. Respected. To outsiders, he seemed like the answer to every problem. Friends described him as ambitious and hardworking. Family members welcomed him immediately. The relationship moved quickly. Within months, wedding plans were underway. Everyone assumed Aisha had finally found happiness. But investigators would later discover something unsettling. Even as wedding preparations continued, her secret life never stopped. The debts remained. The fear remained. And somewhere in the background, another plan was already taking shape. Months before the wedding, money began moving through a hidden account. Small amounts at first. Then larger transactions. The transfers came from multiple cities. Multiple names. Multiple sources. Investigators spent years trying to understand what the money represented. Was it repayment? Was it extortion? Was it preparation for escape? Nobody knew for certain. But one thing became increasingly clear. The account wasn't random. It was part of a carefully organized plan. A plan that was already in motion long before anyone realized it existed. Then there was Vikram Rao. The mysterious man connected to hundreds of phone calls. When investigators eventually reconstructed their communication history, a pattern emerged. The calls increased dramatically as the wedding approached. Sometimes lasting minutes. Sometimes lasting hours. Late nights. Early mornings. Private conversations nobody else knew about. Whatever connected them, it was important. Important enough to remain hidden. Important enough to survive for years without detection. And important enough to play a critical role on the night Aisha disappeared. The final week before the wedding was filled with celebrations. Family gatherings. Wedding rehearsals. Photographs. Parties. Laughter. But according to investigators, Aisha wasn't focused on the wedding. She was focused on timing. Every detail mattered. Every movement mattered. Every minute mattered. Because by that point, the plan was nearly complete. Documents had been prepared. Money had been moved. Contacts had been established. And somewhere deep inside, she had already made her decision. The wedding would happen. But the life that followed would belong to someone else. According to her confession, everything happened exactly as planned. After Armand fell asleep, Aisha quietly left the suite. Not through the front door. Not through the lobby. Not through any location covered by standard surveillance cameras. Instead, she moved through a hidden service corridor used primarily by hotel staff. The route had been identified weeks earlier. She knew exactly where to go. Exactly where to turn. Exactly where someone would be waiting. And as she disappeared into the darkness of that corridor, one life ended while another began. Hours later, she received something investigators had spent years searching for. A new identity. A new name. A new history. Documents that allowed her to become someone else entirely. For 6 years, those documents worked. She rented apartments. Opened accounts. Built relationships. Raised a family. All while hiding behind a carefully constructed lie. It was one of the most successful disappearances investigators had ever encountered. But even the best lies eventually leave traces behind. And eventually, someone notices. 3 days after the confession, authorities made their move. Reporters gathered outside the building. Cameras lined the street. Residents watched from balconies. As officers escorted Aisha into a waiting vehicle, silence spread through the crowd. For years, people had viewed her as a victim. Now she stood accused of orchestrating one of the most elaborate deceptions in recent memory. The woman everyone searched for had been hiding in plain sight. And the truth was finally catching up to her. The trial attracted nationwide attention. Every hearing generated headlines. Every witness created new debate. Prosecutors argued that Aisha had knowingly deceived everyone around her. Defense attorneys painted a different picture. A woman under pressure. A woman driven by fear. A woman who believed she had no other choice. The courtroom became divided. So did public opinion. Some saw a criminal. Others saw a victim. But nobody knew that the biggest twist of the entire story was still waiting. Because while investigators were preparing to close the case, a mysterious package was already on its way to Armand Khan. And inside that package was evidence that would change everything. 2 weeks after the verdict, Armand Khan was trying to move on with his life. The media attention had finally begun to fade. The court proceedings were over. The mystery appeared solved. For the first time in years, it seemed as though the story had finally reached its conclusion. Then a package arrived. No return address. No sender name. No fingerprints. Nothing. Just a plain brown envelope sitting quietly outside his apartment door. At first, Armand almost threw it away. But something about it felt strange. Something felt deliberate. Inside the envelope was a USB drive. Several photographs. And a handwritten note containing a single sentence. A sentence that would reopen the entire case. She lied to everyone. But she didn't lie about everything. Armand stared at the message for several seconds. Then he inserted the USB drive into his laptop. The screen filled with folders. Images. Video clips. Documents. Most appeared ordinary. Until he opened a folder labeled Wedding Night. Inside were security recordings. Recordings that had never appeared in the official investigation. Recordings nobody should have possessed. As the footage began playing, Armand felt his stomach tighten. Because he was looking at evidence the police had never seen. Evidence that suggested someone had deliberately hidden the truth. And if that was true, then the investigation had missed something important. Something enormous. The footage showed the hotel's service corridor. The same corridor investigators believed Aisha used during her escape. At first, everything matched her confession. Aisha entered the hallway. She moved toward the rear exit. Exactly as she had described. But then something unexpected happened. A second figure appeared. A man. Waiting in the shadows. Watching. The timestamp confirmed the recording was authentic. The man wasn't part of Aisha's original statement. He wasn't mentioned in police reports. And he certainly wasn't visible in the official CCTV footage. Which meant someone had intentionally removed this recording from evidence. The question was why. The figure's face wasn't immediately visible. The camera quality was poor. The hallway lighting was weak. But investigators enhanced the footage. Frame by frame. Pixel by pixel. And eventually, a face emerged from the darkness. The result stunned everyone involved. Because the man wasn't a hotel employee. He wasn't a family member. And he wasn't Vikram Rao. The mystery had just become far more complicated. For 6 years, nobody knew this person existed. Now he had become the most important person in the entire investigation. After several days of analysis, authorities finally identified the man. His name was Rohan Malhotra. A former private security contractor. According to records, Rohan specialized in surveillance systems and access control infrastructure. In other words, he understood cameras. He understood blind spots. And he understood exactly how to avoid being seen. But there was a problem. A very serious problem. Rohan Malhotra was dead. At least, according to official records. 3 years earlier, he had reportedly died in a highway accident outside Mumbai. The case should have ended there. But investigators quickly noticed something disturbing. The accident file didn't make sense. The more investigators examined the accident report, the stranger it became. Witness statements contradicted each other. Photographs were missing. Several pages appeared incomplete. And perhaps most alarming of all, no family member had officially identified the body. The file contained just enough information to close the case. But not enough information to confirm it. Suddenly, detectives were asking a terrifying question. What if Rohan Malhotra never died at all? And if he was still alive? What role had he played in Aisha's disappearance? Investigators began tracing Rohan's financial history. What they discovered was shocking. Months before Aisha's wedding, large sums of money moved through accounts connected to Rohan. 20 lakh rupees. Then another transfer. Then another. The money flowed through multiple countries. Multiple shell companies. Multiple identities. This wasn't ordinary fraud. This was organized. Professional. Carefully designed to avoid detection. And for the first time, investigators began considering a possibility nobody had imagined before. Maybe Aisha wasn't the mastermind. Maybe she was only one piece of something much larger. As evidence accumulated, a disturbing pattern emerged. Several other missing person cases contained similar details. Sudden disappearances. Fake identities. Unexplained financial activity. Travel records that led nowhere. Individually, the cases seemed unrelated. Together, they painted a very different picture. Investigators believed they had uncovered a hidden network. A network specializing in helping people disappear. New names. New documents. New lives. For a price. And if the theory was correct, then Aisha had never acted alone. Someone had helped her. Someone powerful. Someone experienced. Someone who remained free. Then another piece of evidence surfaced. A recorded phone conversation. The recording had been hidden among files recovered from the anonymous USB drive. The voice quality was poor. The conversation was brief. But one sentence changed everything. A male voice could be heard saying, "Once she's gone, nobody will ever find her." Investigators immediately launched forensic analysis. Whose voice was it? Rohan's? Someone else's? The answer could expose the person who orchestrated the entire operation. And for the first time, detectives believed they were getting close. Very close. Late one evening, while reviewing old wedding photographs, an investigator noticed something everyone else had missed. A face. Hidden in the background. Barely visible. Standing near the edge of the crowd. The same face appeared in multiple photographs. Different locations. Different moments. Always watching. Never interacting. Never smiling. Facial recognition software produced a match. The result shocked the entire task force. Because the man wasn't a stranger. He was connected to someone much closer than anyone expected. Someone who had been part of the investigation from the very beginning. And as detectives prepared to make an arrest, they realized a chilling truth. The disappearance of Aisha Mehra wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The facial recognition match stunned the task force. The man hidden in the wedding photographs wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't even a hotel employee. He was a retired police investigator who had briefly worked on the original missing persons case. For years, nobody questioned his involvement. Nobody suspected him. Yet somehow, he appeared near multiple key events connected to Aisha's disappearance. And now investigators wanted answers. At first, he denied everything. He claimed the appearance was a coincidence. A misunderstanding. An unfortunate mistake. But detectives already knew more than he realized. Bank transfers. Phone records. Travel logs. The evidence was growing stronger every day. And slowly, the cracks began to appear. After nearly 9 hours of questioning, the retired investigator finally spoke. He admitted knowing Rohan Malhotra. He admitted helping remove surveillance footage. And he admitted accepting money. But according to him, he wasn't the mastermind. He was only doing what he had been paid to do. Someone else had organized the entire operation. Someone with far more power. The investigation uncovered a hidden organization operating across multiple cities. Its purpose was simple. For the right price, people could disappear. New identities. New documents. New lives. Most clients wanted to escape debt. Some wanted to escape criminal charges. Others wanted to leave their past behind forever. And Aisha had become one of their most successful cases. Among thousands of recovered documents, investigators discovered a single file. Aisha's file. Inside were photographs, financial records, travel plans, and communication logs. Everything had been prepared months before the wedding. The evidence confirmed a shocking truth. Her disappearance wasn't spontaneous. It had been planned with military precision. Every step. Every route. Every backup plan. Nothing had been left to chance. The final suspect wasn't a criminal mastermind living in hiding. He was a respected businessman. A public figure. A man whose reputation appeared flawless. Behind the scenes, however, investigators believed he financed the identity network for years. His money funded operations. His connections protected participants. And his influence kept investigators away. Until now. The arrest warrants were issued immediately. Raids took place across the country. Properties were searched. Accounts were frozen. Witnesses were located. For the first time, the organization began collapsing under pressure. Years of secrecy disappeared in a matter of days. And investigators finally felt they were closing in on the truth. While awaiting sentencing, Aisha wrote a final letter. The letter wasn't addressed to investigators, or reporters, or lawyers. It was addressed to her daughter. In it, she described her mistakes, her fears, her regrets, and the consequences of choosing escape over honesty. It was the first time she accepted responsibility without excuses. Months later, the final verdicts were delivered. Several members of the network received lengthy prison sentences. Financial assets were seized. Corrupt officials were convicted. And one of the country's most complex investigations finally reached its conclusion. The mystery had been solved. But the damage remained. Lives had been permanently changed. Trust had been destroyed. And time could never be returned. In the end, the story was never really about a missing bride. It was about choices. The choices people make when fear becomes stronger than reason. The choices that seem small in the moment but grow into life-changing consequences. Aisha wanted a new beginning. Instead, she created a trail of heartbreak stretching across years. Armand spent 6 years searching for answers. Families spent years living with uncertainty. And a little girl grew up caught between two identities. As the sun rose over Jaipur once again, the headlines faded into history. The courtrooms emptied. The cameras disappeared. And the mystery that once captivated an entire nation finally came to an end. But for the people who lived it, the consequences would last forever. The end.